Robert Cox.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This has been a very important bill discussion over the course of the last few weeks. It's been a great honour to speak in something that is so important to so many of my constituents. It's also been very good to see the way that the House works very constructively together, as it does on occasions where there are particularly important and historic matters for us to discuss, as we have seen here. I'm very grateful to the Government for having listened so constructively to many of the points I've made, some on behalf of my constituents and some that I've made on my own reading of the bill, and have answered a great many of them, and I'll address those in due course in the course of my few brief comments. I don't support the new Clause 1 that has been proposed by the opposition, and I do think that the Government has proposed a better way of doing that. And I say that for two reasons. They have been covered already, but they do bear repeating. The first of those, perhaps, is the fact that the Government simply goes further. The opposition's new Clause 1 deals with only species that are CITES listed, and that means that the honourable member who spoke before me, whose constituency I'm afraid I haven't got at the tip of my tongue, where she... Bladen, thank you. Do apologise. The honourable member for Bladen quite rightly raises a concern that we all have. It's one I raised in second reading as well, about a species displacement, for want of a better phrase. That in fact this amendment, if this new clause of anything, makes that more likely, because it doesn't cover species that aren't on the CITES list, such as warthog, that we've heard of already. So we do need to ensure that we can go further. And there's much more freedom in the way the Government's approaching this, in terms of adding additional species, whether they are endangered or not, whether they are extant or extinct, and it will also cover the mammoth, which, as we've heard, is being mined, and also leaves a loophole whereby mammoth ivory can be passed off as elephant ivory. So it's a much, much better way of doing it. The Government's amendment goes further. It also, I submit, secondly, it goes faster, because we can deal with the matter by secondary legislation. The big problem, and this really is the overriding one, I understand entirely what the opposition are trying to do with new Clause 1, but it seems to me that the major problem is the procedural one, which is that if there is a challenge raised to primary legislation on the rights of under the human rights ground, that we may run into difficulty on the whole Act, and that would be something that is a great shame. Now, I have thought very hard about this, because I am naturally of the mind, I'm a lawyer, I don't like legislation that is rushed through, because often rushed laws are bad laws, and I would instinctively prefer that we took more time and got it right. But I do understand that there is very much a need in this case, with the conference coming up, with all of the heartbreaking stories that we've heard about today and throughout the whole of the bill and during the evidence session, that we move quickly. It's very important that we make clear that this ivory trade is something that isn't any longer acceptable. It's also very important that we make clear that Britain is a leader on this, is a world leader. We've heard of the great work that's being done by the Army. We'll pay tribute to them, and also through DFID. And there's a lot more that we can look and expand that work as well. It's something that I very much welcome. So I do think for those reasons that we do need to get this Act on the statute book as soon as is possible, although that goes to a certain extent against my natural instinct, where I prefer to slow things down and take more time and make sure there wasn't a hiccup further along the line. I am sensitive to the concern about everything being pushed into the long grass and the further expansion never happening, but of course I'm very encouraged by the announcement that the Secretary of State has made today, whereby he will be consulting on this now. So it seems to me that the Government has approached this in entirely the right way. So I've had a number of concerns about the bill as we've gone through. I've had some concerns that have been raised by constituents with regards to the antique trade. They've been answered, and I'm very grateful to the Minister for having done so, and in full, and at relatively short notice. I had some concerns as well about the definitions aspect of Section 35, and it seems to me that the amendments that the Government have brought in also deal with those, because it means that we're not having to worry about the particular species once the further secondary legislation has been brought in to expand further that species list. We can move quickly. We can move forward with legislation that sets a positive leading path for Britain nationally. It's something I wholeheartedly welcome, and I thank the Government very much for having listened to all of us who've expressed concerns, and where they have been answered. I welcome very much the bill and the amendments to it that the Government puts forward.
Yeah.